It is said that he also went to Iraq, and if he did, it was probably for a short period of time. And what strikes you, or at least me, is that he wasn't articulate in the public on matters that are political. Of course, those who are Shi'is say that this is an act of taqiyya, which means that he did not disclose for the reason of security his political ideas. There is nothing that I came across that indicates that he was intent on gaining power. That doesn't mean that he wasn't aware of the power dynamics of the time. He wasn't aware of all of it. No. It also doesn't mean that he wasn't concerned with them. No, he was concerned with them. But there's, like Imam Zayd, if we take these two as a comparison, Imam Zayd was a person who was, in today's language, he was a revolutionary. For those of you who don't have any problems, and I know many of you out there, not necessarily in here, in the Muslim public, there's a lot of conceptual and traditional issues that interfere. But for those of you who understand things without the connotations that go with them, Imam Zayd was in today's world something like Che Guevara. He was a no-nonsense person. He knew that there was a political damage that was done to the Muslims, and something has to be corrected, and someone has to do something about this. Someone has to do something about this. You can't just be passive. But when you take a look at Imam Sadiq, even though he knew something had to be done about this, but he wasn't the type that was going to get involved in doing something about it. And when I say do something about it, that means in the action sense. You organize, you have a goal, and you're out to change the world. That was not in his program, so to speak. That doesn't mean he didn't want to change the world. Please, be careful. Be careful. Okay. It is also reported that he said in this regard, and maybe this answers at-taqiyya, and this answers the question here by some, he is reported to have said, at-taqiyyatu dini wa dinu abai. That's a very famous quote, which means at-taqiyya amounts to, at-taqiyya amounts to my deen and the deen of my forefathers. And the issue of taqiyya is referenced in an ayah in Surah Al Imran, لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقاه. See? إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقاه. The ayah means that لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين. Committed Muslims should not have kafirs as their political superiors or as their political allies. لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين, to the exclusion of the committed Muslims. وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ. And whoever does that does not relate to Allah in any manner. You can bring this ayah and its meanings into today's world. إِلَّا أَن تَتَّقُوا مِنْهُمْ تُقَى. Except if you practice this tuqah or this taqiyya in this context. Is anyone lost?
Could you read the ayah once more? Mr. Raymond?
Yeah. لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقاه ويحذركم الله نفسه. Which means that you see, this ayah, we have to go back to the climate of the time. The Muslims were building an Islamic social and political structure in Arabia. And there was an Islamic society and state in Al-Madinah. And there were people who were becoming Muslims. And there were people, power blocks, power factions, power tribes in Arabia who were in a political and ideological and military sense opposed to this Islamic reality in Al-Madinah and growing from there. Those who were in Al-Madinah with the Prophet building this Islamic reality were referred to as Al-Mu'mineen. Those who were opposed to it in theory and in practice through policies and through warfare are called Al-Kafirin. And this is where, if you reconstruct this in your mind, then you begin to read this ayah. لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين. As these two realities are clashing with each other, word comes down from heaven in this ayah telling the committed Muslims you should not have political relationships of affinity or allegiance to the kafirs at the expense of the mu'mins. And whoever positions himself to do that, whoever goes from being in the Islamic power block to belonging to a kafir power block, does not belong to Allah. فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا أَن تَتَّقُوا مِنْهُمْ تُقَاةً. Except if, for survival purposes, if you think that the government of the kuffar and its instruments are going to come down on you. Let's say you're not living in Al-Madinah. You're a committed Muslim who is living in Mecca, and Mecca at the time was a mushrik Mecca, was a kafir Mecca at war with Al-Madinah. And you fear that if you're going to come out and express your Islamic allegiance and identity, they're going to chop your head off. Or they're going to torture you in a way that you're not going to be able to bear it. Or anything of that magnitude is going to happen to you, then Allah gives you the exemption. إِلَّا أَن تَتَّقُوا مِنْهُمْ تُقَاةً.